Introduction.
This is going to be a video going over an Iceberg made by VikIscariot. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I've added a few of my own entries on here in red text, as I had a few on the top of my head I wanted to put on. I'll also probably mispronounce a bunch of the words on here, as I don't speak Japanese, so please excuse me there. Just to quickly go over a couple terms you'll need to know for this video. The Yakuza 7 refers to Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is the latest entry in the series, because I really didn't want to have to say Yakuza Like a Dragon every single time. Another term you'll need to know is RGG, referring to Ryu ga Gotoku, which is what the games are called in Japan, meaning like a dragon in English. To go along with this, RGG Studio refers to the development studio behind the games, Ryu ga Gotoku Studio. Now there will be spoilers for most of the games in the series on here, but I'm gonna try and avoid major spoilers for the latest games in the series, like Judgment, Yakuza 7, and Lost Judgment. With that said, let's get started. Baka Mitai, also known as Dame Dane, is Yakuza's most popular karaoke song by a long shot, mostly due to it trending as a meme back in 2020. The song has transcended past Yakuza at this point, and to the majority of the internet it is the funny, sad Japanese guy song. After the massive success of Yakuza 0, and especially Majima's half of the story, Sega decided they wanted to do something special in the remake of Yakuza 1, for Majima was originally more of a side villain. With this, they decided on the Majima Everywhere system, an unavoidable system in Yakuza Kiwami in which you fight Majima in a host of different outfits and styles to regain your strength after 10 years in the joint make Kiryu a fucking pussy.
10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy.
Tiger Drop.
The Tiger Drop is by far the most iconic move in the Yakuza series. The move itself is a counter hook Kiryu can perform just before an enemy lands their attack. It's featured in pretty much every Yakuza game and even the Judgment series under a different name, and is pretty busted in pretty much all of these if you know how to use it correctly. It's also used by Komaki in training missions if you want to be on the receiving end. Lord of the Night was Majima's nickname in Yakuza 0, later going by the Mad Dog of Shimano. He was given this nickname due to his extreme proficiency in the nightlife business.
Friday Night.
Another one of Yakuza's most iconic tracks, Friday Night was featured in Yakuza 0 as the main disco theme.
It's Friday night. Let's dance. One of the biggest draws of the Yakuza series, besides the excellent stories, is the aspect of virtual tourism in Japan. Pretty much every city featured in the games has their own set of unique minigames, ranging from cabaret clubs, bowling, hunting, golfing, fishing, diving, disco, baseball, boxing, joining a biker gang, and a shit ton more. Each of these usually even have different tiers of difficulties and challenges, making them even more in-depth.
Yakuza 0 on PC.
Yakuza 0 on PC was the first of the Yakuza games to receive a port all the way back in 2018, which paved the way for the rest of the series to release on PC as well. Alongside the releases on Xbox and Game Pass, this massively grew the audience for the series in the West. In Yakuza 6, Kiryu can take on the role of town mascot Onomichio, with his charming Hisaku face, steamy Onomichi ramen hat, cute fish pouch, cool boots vital for any fisherman, and his bold and trendy Ono shirt. He became the pride of Onomichi. He also makes small cameos in Judgment and Yakuza 7.
Nugget and Omelette.
Nugget and Omelette are two chickens used in the side business sub-stories of Yakuza 0 and Yakuza 7. In 0, Nugget's obtained upon getting a turkey in the bowling minigame, who can be used as a manager in the Real Estate Royale minigame. In Yakuza 7, Omelette serves as the mascot of Ichiban Holdings and as a summon in battles.
Mr. Libido.
Mr. Libido, also known as Walking Erection, is a bit of a meme character from Yakuza 0. In the actual game, he's only there to accept items for a side activity with telephone cards, but he does actually make an appearance in the main story, albeit it is missable.
Kiryu is a virgin.
One of the lead directors and producers on the Yakuza series, Masayoshi Yokoyama, fully believes and is of the opinion that Kiryu is likely a virgin throughout the entire series. His reasoning stems from Kiryu not moving on from Yumi, who died at the end of Yakuza 1. Some other supporting evidence is in 5, when a hostess has been trying to get with him for 6 months, and at one point literally getting naked in front of him, and he just brushes it off and essentially tells her to buzz off.
Ichiban Dragon Quest obsession.
So this one is impossible to miss if you played Yakuza 7, but Ichiban is fucking obsessed with Dragon Quest. It's also the canonical reason for the turn-based combat and everything that comes along with it.
Yakuza Kiwami 3.
If RGG Studio were to continue making Kiwami versions of games, Yakuza 3 theoretically would be next in line, unless they did Kenzan first, which did release before it. However, with the release of the remastered collection a few years ago, I have my doubts this will come to fruition, at the very least not in the near future.
Dead Souls.
Dead Souls is a zombie shooter spin-off game in the franchise, and is effectively what killed the series upon release in the West, leading to Yakuza 5 not receiving localization for years. Truth be told, the game really isn't that good either, especially with the terrible optimization stemming from it only being available on PS3. It isn't a bad game, it's just not up to the standards of the rest of the series. With that being said, it is notable for being the first game to have Majima as a playable protagonist. Kuze is one of the central antagonists of Yakuza 0, being the first of the 3 lieutenants Kiryu takes on. As the game progresses, Kiryu fights Kuze a total of 5 times, each with a different moveset in a different location. He definitely deserves his place on the Iceberg due to having arguably the greatest scene in the entire series.
Gokudo no sekai ni KO wa ne. Ora na Kiryu. Yubi no 1本や2本なくそうが、阿野や渋沢に頭取られようが、そんなことは構えしねえんだ。命ある限り何度でも這い上がってやる。だからよ、てめえみたいな半端もんが一番許せねえんだよ。死ねえボケ！
Goromi is a persona Majima takes on as part of the Majima Everywhere system, where he disguises himself and acts as a hostess. While usually Majima Everywhere encounters result in a battle, this one leads to a full hostess chat minigame with Goromi. Which still ends in a battle, of course.
Kiryu has ever killed.
A common characteristic attributed to Kiryu is that he's never directly killed anyone in cold blood or otherwise. While some heat moves are pretty fucking deadly looking, he canonically hasn't killed anyone, and some characters even bring it up to him.
Tier 2. Michael Jackson and Steven Spielberg.
As Yakuza 0 was set in the 80s, and 2 of the biggest names on Earth at the time were Steven Spielberg and especially Michael Jackson, Yakuza 0 spoofs these two in side quests with Miracle Johnson and Steven Spinning. In these sub-stories, Kiryu needs to help the two shoot a music video, and in another, Kiryu has a dance battle with the King of Pop himself.
Wrestlers in Yakuza.
The Yakuza games have a ton of cameos from real-world Japan pro wrestlers. The biggest cameos being the entire lineup of bad guys from the Kiwami 2 construction storyline.
Ghost in Kiwami 2.
Kiwami 2 is a sub-story where Kiryu is given a mysterious tape. Upon playing it, there's a spooky face on the screen which he gets freaked out by. He's told outside that he's been cursed, and promptly gets scammed out of 400,000 yen with a fake exorcism. The end of the sub-story reveals that the ghost was actually real, making ghosts canonical to the Yakuza series.
Kirby's Kid Fist of the North Star DLC.
As a fun little DLC that was initially free upon release, Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise added a skin for Kenshiro that was straight up just Kiryu. As the two are voiced by the same guy, the skin made perfect sense to make, and is one of the best outfits in the game. And besides, who doesn't want to be Kiryu fucking killing people? It's funny.
Osaka Castle.
So Yakuza 2 has a really fucking weird moment that isn't ever referenced or acknowledged in the entire series past when it happens, where a giant castle splits in half and a golden replica of that same castle rises from the ground to replace it, being filled with ninjas and tigers. The only real explanation for this moment is that Kiryu was zonked due to blood loss and painkillers because he got stabbed earlier in the same chapter. Because otherwise, this is the most insane thing that's ever happened in any of the games by far. Keep in mind, this is in the main story of the game. It is not a side quest.
4 actresses in Yakuza games.
So in case you didn't know, Yakuza has a shit ton of Zorn actresses in it. These actresses usually are playing the hostesses in either the hostess management or just regular hostess minigames. They're also found in the adult videos in Yakuza 0, and the video chat room minigame in Yakuza 6.
Removed Kiwami 2 music.
So one of the biggest complaints directed at Kiwami 2 is the game's cut content compared to the original release. For some reason, whether it's due to time, budget, or licensing, Sega straight up dumped a ton of iconic music tracks, replacing them with completely original songs or songs that weren't meant for these moments. Most of these removed tracks are by composer Hideki Sakamoto, with some removed songs like West Insanity, Evil Itself, and Tracker. Another huge change was the removal of the Crazy Ken Band song in the stabbing scene. In the original game, the song perfectly fit the mood, atmosphere, and pacing of the scene, whereas the Sim song they replaced it with just doesn't do the scene justice. I can't play these two because they're both copyrighted, but they're both on YouTube if you want to check out the differences in tone it creates. Also, just a quick note, if you're playing on PC, there's mods to add all these songs back in, so check those out if you're going to play Kiwami 2 anytime soon.
Yakuza 0 and Kiwami comic.
So I'm not really sure why this entry specifically lists Zero and Kiwami, maybe because it was released around those games, but on the Yakuza Experience website a comic detailing the events from Yakuza 0 to 6 can be found. It's 10 chapters long and covers the in-game events of each game in the series up to that point.
Yakuza film.
In 2007 a film adaptation of the first game was made. It's notable for Majima and Kiryu having fucking shotguns and actually just killing people. The full movie is available in HD with English subtitles on YouTube, by the way, so check it out if that sounds insane. The Bola is a nightclub located in Theater Square that makes an appearance in Yakuza 0, 1, and Kiwami 2. In Yakuza 0, Kiryu has his iconic encounter with Awano here directly after the motorcycle fight. In Yakuza 1, a ton of shit happens here, most notably a boss fight with 2 gangsters. And in Yakuza 2, Kiryu can pick up bouncer missions from the bartender.
Akiyama loaded shark system.
In Yakuza 4 and 5, Akiyama is a pretty mysterious dude, and still is, really. It's revealed over the course of Yakuza 4 that he gives out loans to people who can pass very specific tests to judge their commitment. These loans are interest and collateral free, as well as unlimited in their amount.
I peacocked your mom.
Upon arriving in Sotenbury for the first time and being harassed by a thug, Kiryu canonically responds with the greatest line in video game history.
Lost Judgment DLC.
Lost Judgment was the first game in the series to receive some full-on story content in a DLC pack. While other games like 7 and the original Judgment have had a few minor extras as DLC, Lost Judgment has a full fighting style, multiple sub-stories, and an entire campaign starring Kaido locked away as DLC.
RGG Kenzan and Ishin.
RGG Kenzan and Ishin are the last two big RGG Studios games that haven't been released in the West. The two games are samurai-era Yakuza games featuring cool swordplay, returning voice actors from the main series, and boppin' soundtracks. At this point, I wouldn't exactly bet money on Kenzan ever making a West Side, not only due to its age, but also very not okay subject matter in the West. Ishin, however, still could totally be translated and ported, as it's a PS4 game on the Zero engine, meaning decent graphics and smooth 60 FPS gameplay. There's two main things that held Ishin back from being released. One was that it was before Zero exploded the series in the West, and the second was that the producers of the series were of the opinion that the Western audience simply wouldn't be able to understand the story. If you're really desperate to play these games, it's pretty easy to import a copy. Just know you'll need a translation guide if you're going to go through them.
Be my baby.
Be My Baby is one of the most iconic sub-stories in the series, where Kiryu is invited to a club and meets with a woman who tries to change him into a diaper. Upon refusal, he accidentally knocks over a false wall, revealing a room full of Yakuza members in diapers. They take offense to Kiryu not joining in with them, and Kiryu promptly beats the shit out of them and teaches their boss the lesson that he shouldn't force his kinks onto others.
Real brands.
So pretty much every Yakuza game aside from maybe Fist of the North Star has a bunch of real-life brands within their cities. This ranges from items like Mountain Dew, shops like Don Quixote, and of course Club Sega. The Yakuza Wiki has a full page of every product placement in the series if you're interested in learning more about this. Because let me tell you, there is a fucking lot of product placement.
Lost Judgment UFO.
One sub-story in Lost Judgment has Yagami zooming around town, following reports of a UFO flying around. At the end, it's just revealed as being a drone made to look like a UFO. However, at the very end of the sub-story, a massive, real UFO flies in just before it ends, making aliens canon in the series.
Yakuza 4 Betrayal Streak.
So around the end of Yakuza 4, Kiryu is betrayed by Kido, who is revealed to be in cahoots with Katsuragi. Then Kido betrays Katsuragi and shoots him, where it's revealed that he's actually in cahoots with Arai. Then Arai shoots Kido, where it's revealed that he's in cahoots with himself. Then Katsuragi reveals that he saw the betrayal coming and kills Saijima's sister, but she betrays his naive thinking that he had a master plan by also killing him. The chapter this takes place in is literally called Chain of Betrayal, by the way.
Shangri-La.
Shangri-La is a recurring location in the series, being a major location in 1, 2, 6, and 7. While it mainly just serves as a cool battle location in those first 3 games, in 7 it's revealed Ichiban was born and raised there.
Amon Clan.
The Amon clan is an elite group of fighters headed by Joe Amon for the majority of the series. In-game they function as a reward for fully completing the game, usually being the reward for completing all sub-stories. Upon completion of whatever is needed, Amon will contact the player requesting a meetup in a specific location, and will then serve as a super boss with copious amounts of health and insane damage.
Kiryu Tekken.
So Kiryu has a massive push to be added to Tekken, with producers from both Bandai Namco and Sega commenting on it. Katsuhiro Harada, the producer of Tekken, said that he was taken aback by the demand, and Nagoshi, the creator of Yakuza, said that Kiryu wouldn't appear because he doesn't want to be seen beating up women.
Bob Utsunomiya.
Bob Utsunomiya is a recurring The Joker 2019 character in the games who pretty much is exclusively there to function as a special item and reward vendor.
Rubber bullets.
Yakuza 4 features one of the dumbest and worst plot twists in the entire series, being that fucking everything was rubber bullets. It serves fine enough as a plot twist, sure, but it really takes away from some of the greater emotional scenes. Like everyone just fucking waking up after Saijima's massacre.
Mark Hamill Majima.
Exclusive to the PS2 dub of Yakuza 1, Mark Hamill voiced Majima.
Like always, you're as tough as nails. I knew you were, Kazuma-chan, but, I'm not finished yet. I'm doing this because he disrespected you.
He's learned his lesson.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh!
Sadly, he didn't return for the dub of Yakuza 7, instead being replaced by Matt Mercer.
Enemy name Sega.
So if you didn't know, Yakuza enemies have a bunch of random surnames that can appear over their health bars, one of which is Sega. Yakuza 6 actually has a completion list achievement specifically for defeating an enemy named Sega, so that's kinda cool.
Mama in Earth Angel.
The mama in Earth Angel is a character named Eiko Okano. Previous to starting Earth Angel, Okano was a founding member of the motorcycle gang Black Thunder, alongside Yuya. Fun fact, Okano has appeared in every mainline game including the Judgment series, with the exception of 6 due to the Champion District being blocked off.
Charismatic photo.
The charismatic photo is an item obtainable in the series that increases the encounter rate for street fights to an absurd degree. With this on, you'll essentially be in non-stop street fights. It's common to see posts on various sites of people asking why their game has so many encounters, being completely oblivious to the effects of the photo.
God's right hand.
God's Right Hand is a move used by the penultimate boss of Yakuza 7. Without using items or a specific skill, this move is a guaranteed one-hit KO, even while defending and at full health.
Karaoke started in Yakuza 3.
Despite being one of the most iconic parts of the series, the games didn't include karaoke until Yakuza 3. This was somewhat rectified with the Kiwami games having karaoke, but the original PS2 Yakuza games didn't. The release of Yakuza 3 marked the first time karaoke was introduced into the series, with songs such as Kamurocho Lullaby and Saturday Night Lover. Kazi is Kiryu's nickname to his closest allies and to his family members. He actually writes into a radio show under the alias of Judgment Kazi in Zero, so he fully embraces the nickname.
Johnny and Associates.
So Johnny and Associates, or Johnny's as I'm going to call it, is the talent agency representing Takuya Kumura, who plays the leading man in the Judgment series. Over the past few years, Sega has been negotiating with them to release the Judgment series on PC because they want those increased sales, they want that dollar bill. But reports so far have said that Johnny's is refusing to budge, not letting it happen. As a bit of context, these guys are super tight with their image rights, and they're super slow to adapt to new forms of media, only adapting to YouTube in 2018. This dispute between Sega and Johnny's is reportedly resulting in Sega possibly canning the franchise, as Takuya is such a huge pull for the series, and also obviously plays Yagami, the main guy. This report and dispute was over a year ago from recording, and as of now it's still unresolved.
Tier 3. Games Japanese names.
So a pretty well-known piece of trivia is that in Japan the series isn't called Yakuza, but rather Ryuga Gotoku, or Like a Dragon. A less known piece of trivia is that some of the games also have subtitles on top of that. Some examples being Yakuza 0 being named Like a Dragon 0, The Place of Oath, and Yakuza 4 being named Like a Dragon 4, the successor of Legend. There's a few other ones, and one actually made its way to the West, with Yakuza 6 being called Yakuza 6, The Song of Life.
Putin in Yakuza 0.
So this is just a gag entry about one of the NPCs in Yakuza 0 looking oddly similar to Putin.
Rare heat actions.
So certain heat actions in the series require such specific circumstances or locations that it's entirely possible you see them at most once per playthrough, or never at all.
Other Sega game soundtracks in stores.
So as a way to recycle a few assets they had lying around, Sega gave the okay to reuse some songs from other series in random shops.
Yakuza 3 sub-stories are bad.
So this one is subjective, and I didn't make the Iceberg, so I don't necessarily agree. But there are definitely two off the top of my head that stand out in this case. One being a weird transphobic sub-story that we'll talk more about that got removed from later releases of the game. Another being the sub-story Early Honeymoon, which was weird enough that it didn't make the cut in the original English release. It did get added to the remaster, but I mean, if you know, you know. This one's just kind of weird. Look it up if you want to know more.
Majima's allergy.
Dead Souls has a fake out where Majima is bitten by a zombie and he begins to turn, with his eye turning red and everything. It's revealed that the zombie that bit him had dentures though, and that his eye was only red because it's allergy season. What could this mysterious allergy be?
Cat shoes.
So the cat shoes are equipable items in the series that grant you way better financial luck, but make enemies way more pissed off. Along with this, every single footstep you make is replaced with a cat's meow.
Black Panther.
The Black Panther games were two more Japanese exclusive releases, this time being for the PSP. These games had you playing as a new character in Kamurocho, and were unique for letting you customize your moveset and fighting style. These games were co-developed by the Def Jam developers, which the games are very similar in style to. If this kind of game sounds up your alley, one cool thing I can let you know is that a small team came together and created a full fan translation patch for Black Panther 2, letting you play through the entire game in English. Definitely worth checking out because they put a ton of work into it. I felt it's also worth mentioning that these games were popular enough in Japan to receive a full TV show and manga adaptation, so that's definitely something.
Millennium Tower redesign.
So there are a few minor layout differences with the Millennium Tower in the series, but overall it's one of the more consistent buildings, maintaining a consistent interior and exterior for the most part. With that being said, Kamurocho Hills has changed pretty drastically in terms of design between the games.
Majima has never killed.
So canonically Majima hasn't killed anyone, despite a big fucking dagger and baseball bat being his weapons of choice.
Low poly rats in Yakuza 4.
Within the sewers of Yakuza 4, if you look closely enough, you can spot animationless low poly rats scurrying around the sewers.
Kiryu in Street Fighter 5.
While not actually being added to Street Fighter 5, there's a very high quality mod replacing Ryu with Kiryu.
Real Yakuza opinion on the games.
Back when Yakuza 3 came out, a reporter got in contact with real members of the Yakuza and got them to sit down and talk about the game while playing it. They found Kamurocho to be dead on to what the real life district once was like, found the characters to be realistic to real life guys they knew, but they really shit-talked Kiryu's drip, including his tattoo. Overall, they were favorable towards Yakuza 3. Now, this is of course an interview from over 10 years ago, and only on one game in the series, so the general opinion may be different nowadays. RGG Online is a non-canon, Japan-exclusive gacha game with its own unique story and characters. Fun fact, this game was actually the first appearance of Ichiban in a game, and so far is the only time he interacts with characters like Akiyama. If a Yakuza gacha game is up your alley, I'm fairly certain there's a fan translation for all the stories. So if you can download it, it's definitely playable without knowing Japanese.
Old boss movesets reused in Coliseum.
So as a way of having a ton of cool fights available in the Colosseums, and to save time and money, various boss movesets are reused in Colosseum fights. They've reused so many in the Colosseum that it would likely be shorter to list characters who haven't had their movesets reused.
Yakuza 3 box art scandal.
So this entry could be referring to two things. The first is that the original Yakuza 3 box art in the West was so fucking dogshit, being the worst cover in the series by far. The other thing this entry could be referring to is that upon re-release for Yakuza 3 Remastered, the cigarette in Kiryu's mouth was removed due to the Japanese government cracking down on smoking in the past decade. This carried over to the English release as well.
RGG 1 and 2 HP.
Way back in 2012 and exclusively in Japan, Sega re-released Yakuza 1 and 2 in HD on the PS3. These titles have never actually made their way west since PS2, so here's hoping these are retranslated one day, so that people have easy access to the originals outside of the Kiwami games.
Daigo responsibility as chairman.
So I don't know if I'm missing something obvious here, but Daigo's responsibility as the chairman is the same as any other chairman, being to keep the clan intact and functioning while keeping the cash flowing. This is however pretty hard to do while in prison or while in a coma.
What?
Imagine when I patch on the wrong eye.
A fun fact about the 2007 movie mentioned earlier, Majima is missing the wrong eye when compared to the games.
Dead Souls Limited Edition.
Dead Souls is the only spin-off game in the series to receive a special edition in the West. This came with a steelbook case and a special item pack. This pack gave you a few guns, items, and a couple outfits for hostesses. Nothing special.
Dragon Engine Physics.
One of the common complaints and talking points of the Dragon Engine games, especially the earlier ones, is the physics. Yakuza 6 introduced a brand new engine which introduced a physics system to ragdolls and fights, which completely changed the dynamic of the games. In games such as Kiwami 2 and 6, enemies are frequently sent flying across the map, glitching out into the sky, bouncing off walls, and other similarly wonky things. As RGG Studio has progressed in Dragon Engine games, this conversation has mostly died down, as games like Lost Judgment and 7 have pretty much fixed all these issues.
Hiroshima Ghosts.
Yakuza 6 has a sub-story in Anamichi where Kiryu deals with a ghost pirate problem by properly beating the shit out of them. The Obitarian is a middle-aged woman making her first appearance in Yakuza 0. Her age is never stated directly, but based on her title, which is a Japanese term for describing a specific type of middle-aged woman, we can assume she's around 40 to 50 years old. She's still kicking 20 years later, as she's physically in Kiwami 2 in a different sub-story. Along with this, she's in the karaoke leaderboards in Yakuza 6, as well as referenced in Yakuza 7, adding another 10-ish years onto her age.
Sharks.
So this is a really non-specific entry, so I'll just say that there's plenty of sharks in the series, both in the fishing minigames as well as the spearfishing minigame.
Heat is real.
Several characters and sub-stories comment on being able to see Kiryu's heat aura, meaning that it's physically, like, actually there, and not just a gameplay thing.
Fakers sub-stories.
In both Yakuza and Judgment, there are several sub-stories involving total posers impersonating the main characters. These are some of the most memorable sub-stories in each game, and of course, they're resolved with fists.
Kiwami 2 filter.
While a few Yakuza games have filters over the gameplay, Kiwami 2 has the worst one by far, adding a puke green filter over everything that's impossible to turn off without modding the game. It sucks especially bad because 6 looks so fucking good without the filter.
Real gacha games commercial in Sega Palaces.
So I couldn't find anything specific on this one, and I don't really know anything about gacha games, but I'm assuming that in the Club Sega buildings there are at least 1 or 2 ads for real-life gacha games on the walls or something.
Kiryu in Monkey Ball /Mafia City /Everybody's Golf 6 /Rainbow 6.
Although he didn't make the cut for Tekken or Street Fighter, Kiryu isn't a stranger to cameo roles in other franchises. His first appearance outside of the series was in Everybody's Golf 6, where he was a playable golfer. His next being in Project X Zone 2, where he and Majima were playable fighters and featured heavily in the story. His next cameo appearance was in Monkey Ball, where he's a bald monkey. His latest appearance was as an alternate costume for Echo in Rainbow Six Siege. One final notable crossover was in the game Binary Domain, which was also developed by RGG Studios, where there was a couple Yakuza skins. Now, none of these collabs even compare to the Big Daddy, which is the Mafia City collab. So everyone remembers those Mafia City memes from like 2018, 2019. The ones with stuff like, "That's how Mafia works," or the fucking level 100 boss memes. Yeah, Yakuza had an official partnership and collaboration with them.
There's no change in the plan.
ある OK, got it. No. There's no change in the plan. Bye.
Tier 4. More fights against bears than Kiryu.
So I don't think this one's actually true, as there's 3 fights with Kiryu and only 2 with bears. But if you're counting the Coliseum where they have repeat fights, it actually is true.
2 Tanimura's.
So after a drug scandal that he was later found innocent in, Tanimura's voice actor left the industry due to how he was treated. This led to his likeness and voice being completely replaced in Yakuza 4 Remastered by a different actor.
Slurs in original Yakuza.
So I may have missed some other examples, but in the older games, sometimes the term Okama was used, which is a slur used to describe trans women in Japan.
Majima kidnaps a child in Yakuza 1.
Before Majima became more of an anti-hero than a villain, he did some devious shit in the first game. In case you've never played it or you just forgot, part of the main story of the first game is Majima kidnapping Haruka just so he can have a swing at Kiryu in a fist fight. It's played off as haha funny Majima antics, but like, he still kidnapped a fucking child.
Wii U ports.
Back in the dark ages of the Wii U days, Sega decided it would be a great idea to port Yakuza 1 and 2 onto that flop of a console. Unsurprisingly, releasing almost 10-year-old games onto a system with a user base of around 1 million in Japan didn't exactly do too well financially. In an interview, the head of the Yakuza series said that the re-releases functioned more as an experiment to test the response, and seeing as not a single Yakuza game has been released onto a Nintendo console since then, it's safe to say the experiment was a overwhelming failure.
Phoenix Wright defended Majima in court.
So a bit earlier we talked about how Majima and Kiryu were in the main campaign of Project X Zone 2. Well, that main story actually features a few lines of dialogues with gags about how Phoenix Wright had previously defended the Tojo clan, and specifically Majima in the past, telling him not to punch the judge.
Karaoke didn't exist until Yakuza 3.
So I don't know if this is a joke entry that karaoke literally didn't exist until Yakuza 3 released, or if it's just a double entry on here by mistake, but I'm gonna go with the former, saying right in here, right now, that Yakuza 3 invented karaoke and it did not exist before that game released. Found deep in the files of Kiwami 2 was a pretty odd looking fella, who clearly is the original model for Yagami. This is presumably the model they used before they got Takuya Kimura on board for the part. This one is different from Beta Yagami, because it's not actually a model found in the files. This one's simply referencing Ichiban's original look from the initial reveal for Yakuza 7, where he actually looks like the crusty old man that he is.
Shinji, Goda and Daigo in Yakuza 0.
Since 0 is a prequel, it threw in a ton of references to games later on in the timeline. I don't know why this one's so far down, because these three are full-on sub-stories, not just small cameos or anything. Daigo is a little shit you've got to babysit for a bit. Shinji's also a little shit you get to beat the shit out of. And Ryuji's a little shit who you beat the shit out of because he was trying to steal your pants.
Yakuza 1 different Majima tattoo.
So in Yakuza 1, before they decided that Majima was going to be a full-on major player in the franchise, they hadn't really designed a full tattoo for him just yet, leaving him with a completely different tattoo compared to other games in the series. This is obviously fixed past Yakuza 1, and they also fixed it in the Kiwami remake, so it's only visible in the original PS2 release of Yakuza.
Obscure Yakuza 5 characters in 0.
So unless I've missed something here, the only real obscure Yakuza 5 character in 0 is Haruka's dance teacher Ogita, who you can face off against in a dance battle as Kiryu. I've tried skimming the wiki and this is the only guy I could find unless I'm missing something that's really obscure.
Ryuji spinoff.
This one is either referencing how Ryuji is a playable character in Dead Souls, which he is, or it's referencing the Ryuji spin-off campaign in RGG Online. Now, as I don't speak Japanese or follow RGG Online, I can't really tell you what happened in it, but it exists. A little rundown, like a basic rundown, is that it follows Ryuji before the events of Yakuza 2. It's set in around 1999. He's going on a little road trip on a motorcycle, and he runs into a few characters from later in the series, such as Junji Han, Kuze, and a few other guys.
Unused karaoke songs.
So I hate to disappoint, but from what I've found, there aren't any full unreleased karaoke songs. The most I could find was an unused backing track for Haruka's version of Get to the Top in Dead Souls.
Ryo Takashima in Kiwami 2.
Ryo Takashima was one of the main antagonists of Yakuza 2, being a young gun big shot in the Omi Alliance. In the remake, RGG Studio decided he should be played by a real, scanned-in actor, completely changing his likeness. Now this kind of fucks with the story because in the original he's supposed to be a younger guy at the top compared to everyone else, but replacing him with an actor in his mid-60s kind of fucks with that. With that said and done, I don't dislike the performance, I just wonder why they felt the need to change it. There's actually a mod for the PC version of Kiwami 2 that tries to restore this original likeness, so if you're a purist, you can get that.
Nobody knows when Majima got married.
While an exact date for Majima and Mirai Park getting married was never given, the 15th anniversary book places it between 1989 and 1992. Now, since she debuted her idol career when she was 18, the two were only married for 1 year, and they were already married by the time of the debut. This places their marriage around 1991 or 1992 more specifically.
UFO in Yakuza 6.
So there's a small pastime you can do in Yakuza 6 that isn't tied to any achievements, completion lists, or sub-stories, being that you can go UFO watching. Around the maps there's a few locations with actual real UFOs, and Kiryu has no reaction.
Shisaigo.
Shinseiko is a location only present in the original version of Yakuza 2. It's another district in Osaka, being a small couple streets and a handful of shops, with the main draw being Sutenkaku Tower. The area was completely cut in Kiwami 2, with all of its cut content being spread around Kamurocho and Sotenburi instead. It was a big loss and had huge backlash when the game released, and sadly, there's no mods or anything to restore it, so if you want to explore Shinseiko, you gotta play the original version.
Cabaret granted close and reopening.
So this is the first one on the list where I genuinely have no idea what it's referencing. I thought maybe in like Yakuza 5 the building was replaced or something, but even there it's still open. Cabaret Grand in 0 is open, it's open in 2, it's open in 5, and it's open in 7, and these are the only games where Osaka is present, so I really don't know what this one's referencing.
Yakuza 3 challenge battles.
Yakuza 3 and a few other games in the series have sort of challenge fights that you can start from the main menu. They're also called climax battles. Now these are just tests of skill that aren't relevant to the overall game. Usually they're just boss rushes, fights with a certain restriction, or timed challenges.
Takaya Kuroda and Goodfellas.
Takaya Kuroda and Goodfellas is Kiryu's voice actor's band. If you're a fan of Kiryu's singing in the karaoke minigames, check them out. They're on Spotify and Apple Music.
Reused interiors from old games.
The games have a few completely reused interiors, such as Smileburger and Kiwami being straight from Yakuza 0, but generally this comes down to all of the games reusing Kamurocho. In reality, most of the shops and locations have very slight variations to adjust to when each game is set.
Majima jacket in Yakuza 3.
One weird oversight, or maybe just a bad design choice in Yakuza 3, is that Majima's jacket straight up looks fucking terrible. It's almost comparable to the PS2 games in its texture work. This is another case where if you're playing on PC there's a mod to fix it, and the side-by-side they provide shows just how bad it is.
Japanese only Yakuza 0 and Kiwami on PS3.
While in the West we got 0 and Kiwami on PS4, Japan got 2 exclusive releases of the 2 on PS3. Keep in mind these releases are worse in pretty much every way, so you're not really missing out on anything.
Kiwami completion list.
From what I can tell, there isn't anything particularly noteworthy with Kiwami's completion list, so I'm just going to assume a few of the minigame requirements are super hard or something like that. Most likely the gambling minigames that require you to get a shit ton of reward points. If anyone has any personal experience with this one, like not being able to complete it because of some insane requirement, please let me know. And just to go over it for anyone that doesn't know, completion lists are pretty much a series of tasks you can do for specific points, usually completion points. Now you can spend these on small upgrades like increased sprint time, or fun items, or getting more cash from enemies in Yakuza 0. They're not necessary at all to complete the game, and they're just for, again, little bonuses, but the tasks in them can be pretty intense depending on what they require.
Exclusive songs for Japan.
Due to all kinds of copyright laws, there's a bunch of songs that are exclusive to the Japanese versions of the games. Mostly the PS3 era games, but also some of the PS4 ones. Now these mostly come in the form of install screen or intro songs, such as Bubble from Yakuza 0. Now aside from intro music, there are some larger exclusions, such as a ton of songs in Yakuza 6 by Tatsuro Yamashita, as well as some radio songs exclusive to the Japanese version of Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise. Now I can't really play any of these again because of the copyright, but if you look it up there's a bunch of comprehensive lists of all the removed Japanese songs. One thing I neglected to mention is that a few of these songs also can't even be played in the Japanese versions of the games anymore, such as Crazy Kenban's song, which we've already gone over from Kiwami 2, as well as Loser from the Yakuza 3 intro.
All tattoo meanings.
So since I really don't want to go over every single tattoo's meaning in the series, I'll just say that each and every tattoo has had a ton of thought and time poured into their design and meaning. Kiryu's represents justice, strength, balance, and wisdom. Majima's represents being wild, dangerous, and full of sorrow. And Nishiki's represents a constant uphill battle, as the koi is swimming against a river upstream to become a dragon. There's a big Twitter thread going over all of the designs by Nate Ming that I'll link below if you want to get some more insight onto this.
Forgotten original Yakuza sub-stories.
There's some sub-stories in the original Yakuza game that never made it into the Kiwami remake. Now they were nothing major or insane, but it is notable that they didn't make the cut. On this note, some sub-stories in Yakuza 2 were altered or removed, due to taking place in Shinseiko, which as mentioned previously, was removed in the remake.
RGG the musical.
While not really a musical, There is an officially licensed full adaptation of the first 2 Yakuza games in stage play form. As of now, the first half of the play is translated on YouTube if you want to check it out.
Yakuza 4 Joker.
If you're good at something, never do it for free.
Hana weight loss.
So during the short time between Hana's departure in the middle of Yakuza 4 and the game's epilogue, she loses a fucking shit ton of weight purely due to fasting.
New Serena Doors Mystery.
The inside of New Serena has a fairly consistent and explained layout, unless I'm missing something here. The front door leads to an elevator, the back door leading to a staircase, and the other 2 doors being safe rooms, assumed to be closets or maybe a bathroom. One part that is absolutely not consistent in the series is the actual floor and location of the back entrance. In pretty much every game, the back staircase into Serena is a different spot.
RGG Kizuna.
RGG Kizuna is another Japan exclusive entry in the series, and another mobile one. This time we've got a card collection deck builder game released around the time Yakuza 5 released. I don't think it's available anymore, nor do I think it's translated anywhere, so don't go looking for this. It's just not worth it.
Tier 5. Multiple actors replaced because of drug scandals.
So most people know that a bit after Yakuza 4, Tanimura's actor got replaced, but I already talked about that earlier, so I'm not going to dwell on it. What fewer people know is that it wasn't the only time an actor got replaced due to drug use. A few months after Judgment was released in Japan, before the game was even announced for localization in the West, actor Pierre Taki was caught up in a drug scandal. Now, because of Japan's insane laws against drug use and the social stigma surrounding them, the game was immediately pulled from shelves and Sega had to completely redo all of the dialogue as well as giving him a new and original face. Again, unless you were keeping up with the news around Judgment, you would never know about this if you're from the West, because it all went down before the game even released stateside.
Nagumo actor controversy.
Now this one really isn't as serious as it sounds, but it's on a similar note as the previous entry. Nagumo's actor from Yakuza 6 was hired on as an entertainer for a party because he's a comedian in Japan. Unbeknownst to him and a few other comedians attending, it was being hosted by a group that was allegedly linked to a money transfer fraud ring. Again, they weren't aware of the group's background, but it still led to them being suspended from their talent agency. Luckily, this controversy didn't result in him getting fucking replaced like those other actors, but if in 10 years they make Kiwami 6, don't be surprised if he's absent.
Akira Yamaoka.
Akira Yamaoka is a Coliseum fighter in Yakuza 2, Kiwami 2, and 5. He's one of few fighters that share Kiryu's moveset, meaning this motherfucker will tiger drop you. He shares the same name as the real-life composer of the Silent Hill games, but I don't think there's any real connection there.
Kiwami Relay.
So found in the game files of Yakuza Kiwami was an unused model for Yoshitaka Mine, the main antagonist of Yakuza 3. Now it's unknown why he was in the files, it's assumed that he was part of some cut sub-story, but we'll never know.
Ichiban loves baby milk.
At the end of the Baby Don't Cry sub-story, which is essentially the same as the Be My Baby sub-story mentioned earlier, Ichiban takes out that same group of adult babies, and soon after, Ichiban and the Patriarch have a heart-to-heart and drink together, enjoying a fine bottle of baby formula. Ichiban very much enjoys the bottle of milk. So over the course of the entire series, Joe Amon has been a mute. Not literally because he does talk in text boxes, but he just doesn't have a voice to go along with it, since he's just a sub-story character. Now this all changed when Yakuza 6 changed the way they approach sub-stories, deciding to fully voice them in exchange for having a few less overall. Now this included the Joe Amon fight, where he was finally given a proper voice.
久しぶりだな、桐生一馬。待っていたぞ。貴様を倒すことが我が一族の宿願。もはや手段は選ばぬ。今こそ貴様を倒し、我らアモン一族が最強であることを示すとき。行くぞ、桐生。
In, I think, one singular climax battle in Kiwami 1, you can play as an absolutely zonked Date. This is the only time he's playable in the entire series.
Haruka and Yagami have the same moves.
So I don't think anyone's made a side-by-side or anything, and I really don't want to study and compare each dance move from the two. So I'm just going to say it's safe to assume that some of Haruka's dancing animations were reused for Lost Judgment's Dance Club minigame.
Kuzei, Ryuji Goda,
Now forgive my pronunciations in this one because it's gonna get kind of mixed up. This is another entry based on Ryuji's story in RGG Online. The actual Ryuji story is set in 1999, and in it Jun Ji-han is trying to recruit Ryuji into the Jingguian Mafia, tagging along with him on a road trip after Ryuji got kicked out of the Omi Alliance. Now skipping forward a bit, Kuze, who had previously been released from prison in the same year, was sent by the Tojo to try and take out the two, to prevent an alliance forming between the Omi and Jingguian.
Adopted child.
Yeah, this is another one where I'm kind of at a loss. I really don't know what this is referring to.
Real Yakuza Like toy line.
Like most other marketable franchises, Yakuza has had its fair share of toys. One particularly funny one is these goofy-ass looking fake Lego figures.
A series of Russian letters.
I don't speak Russian, so I genuinely have no idea what this one's referencing. Putting it into translate gives me ceiling or roof. So I'm gonna make an insane reach here and say that it's referencing this scene from Yakuza 3.
If you're looking for Daigo, Mine's taken him up to the roof.
Broken bone system in lost judgment.
I'm like 99% certain this one's just referencing the Mortal Wound system, which is only present in the first Judgment game. This system basically just had it so that if you took a serious hit from something like a sword or a gunshot, you would permanently lose a chunk of your health, unless you went to a doctor or used a very expensive and rare healing item. This was cut from Lost Judgment and any other game because it just wasn't fun.
Yakuza 0 loud guy face.
For some reason, the Chinese version of Yakuza 0 got its own version of Lao Guy, both in face and voice. In this version, he's played and modeled after actor Sam Lee. And a fun fact here is that until version 1.05 of Yakuza 0's English release, Lao Guy actually used the Chinese voice with the Japanese model. This was patched out, and now he uses the Japanese model and voice for all regions except for China.
Transphobic substory from Yakuza 3 deleted.
I've talked about it a bit on the Iceberg already, but to really dive into it, the original Yakuza 3 release had a sub-story that was removed from the remastered editions. The producers of the series said they removed it due to changing social and moral values of society. The sub-story has Kiryu interacting with a trans woman who basically embodies every negative stereotype about gay and trans people, with Kiryu calling her it and him as some examples. Not only is it a dumb quest, but future entries in the series, some set before Yakuza 3, also show Kiryu as being a really progressive guy as well. So no matter how you spin it, the sub-story just didn't belong in the game.
Yakuza 6 ghost pictures and collectible portraits.
Yakuza 6 has a select few characters who appear in collectible photos scattered across the map. These are all deceased people from Kiryu's past, and to be honest, some of them are pretty fucking random. Like, they have Lao Ka-long, Masura Ihara, and fucking Yoshinobu Tokugawa, who was from Ishin, but not guys like Tachibana, Ryuji Goto, or Rikiya. With all that said about the collectible photos, any character in a collectible photo can also appear as a ghost in specific locations if Kiryu snaps a photo. These can really catch you off guard if you're just trying to take a selfie and boom, there's a ghost up your ass.
Katsuhiro Harada in Kiwami 2.
This is just a gag entry pointing out that one of Ryuji's goons in Kiwami 2 looks very similar to Katsuhiro Harada, producer of Tekken. Now the guy actually goes a bit further because Harada has actually seen it and put out a tweet about it.
Nobody is dead.
I'm fairly certain this is just a joke entry referencing how characters like Kashiwagi managed to come back after getting shredded by a minigun, or Ryuji coming back in Dead Souls. We'll get more into this with a few more specific examples down below, but for now, I'm going to leave it at that.
Beating Miracle Johnson is impossible and pop star Prince rank.
In the dance battle finale of Miracle's sub-stories, he achieves an absolutely perfect score, possibly higher than the max that's possible, but I'm not sure. Either way, it's impossible to beat him. When he kicks your ass, he also achieves a unique rank, being the Popstar Prince rank. This is the only time in the game it's ever achieved. The rank itself is a reference to the real-life Michael Jackson being known as the King of Pop.
Hangman/Redman.
Hangman is a character who appears in Yakuza 6 and then later on Judgment, sporting some wrestling gear, a gimp mask, and a ball gag. He's absolutely shredded and loiters around abandoned buildings fighting and clawing at anyone who comes inside. Now, I don't know if this is some kind of Japanese thing I don't get, or if he's supposed to be like a joke or a gag or something, but he just comes off as like a random thing they threw in, even though he doesn't fit the narrative of either game. As for Redman, he's just a reskin in Kiwami 2 with no story significance, just a clan member and a Coliseum fighter.
Kamuracho Hill free reopening.
Alright, let's quickly go over the timeline of Kamurocho Hills. From Yakuza 0 to Yakuza 1, Kamurocho Hills is a small park named West Park, predominantly used by the homeless as a camp. In Yakuza 2, Kamurocho Hills is a partially built skyscraper that has a large bulk of the work completed. Its construction is being helmed by the Majima Construction Company. In the time between Yakuza 2 and Yakuza 3, the project was canned and the entire construction site was leveled, leaving only a concrete pad. Within only a year between 3 and 4, Kamurocho Hills has resumed development and is now nearly completed in its entirety. By the time of Yakuza 5 and onward, it's complete and open for business. Despite all of this build-up and being a large plot point in most of these games, Kamurocho Hills isn't an accessible area in any of the games. What a waste.
Yakuza 0 PC inventory swap bug.
This is just a reference to an odd bug in the PC release of Yakuza 0 that's gone unpatched for a while, where very rarely inventories can get pretty messed up and corrupted, displaying the wrong items when moving things around. This can be things like turning guns into food or consumables into side quest items.
Yakuza 5 on PS3 European release.
I couldn't find anything specifically notable about the European release. I thought that maybe it had gotten a physical copy and North America didn't, but that wasn't the case. So I'm just going to assume this entry is about the super delayed translation of Yakuza 5. So as mentioned way earlier, Dead Souls pretty much killed the series in the West for a while, and since Yakuza 5 was the next game, it meant that it was affected the most by far. It took 3 years and a huge push from Sony themselves to get the game to the West, and even then they only released it digitally. The next time you're sad you've got to wait a couple months for these games to come out in the West, just remember that it took 3 years for 5 to come out.
Yakuza 3 quiz minigame.
Now, one Japan exclusive side quest from Yakuza 3 was a little quiz minigame. It featured questions relevant to Japanese culture. It was cut from the PS3 version of Yakuza 3 and never ended up making its way to Yakuza 3 Remastered, leaving it as one of the only sub-stories not to make it into any Western version of Yakuza 3.
Tier 6. Fujitsu Island True Meaning.
So fun fact, the super upbeat and happy sounding Today is a Diamond from Yakuza 6 yeah, it's about Haruka being in a coma and Kiryu desperately wanting her to awaken from it. The song ends with these final lines.
Kiryu isn't a virgin.
So if you're one of the elite gamers with the mindset that every sub-story is canon to the games, unless Kiryu is simply having sleepovers and love hotels with the phone girls in Zero, he has definitely canonically fucked.
Akiyama's past.
So I don't think this one's this low because it's obscure or anything, just because it's sad. Now Akiyama was a whiz kid, graduating with a business degree at the top of his class, landing a job at an investment firm which he also quickly rose to the top of. He started dating his co-worker, eventually getting engaged, but was fired in 2005 after getting framed for embezzlement. He spent all of his money trying to prove his innocence but failed, which led to him becoming homeless and his fiancée leaving him for the man who framed him.
Stolage vodka in Yakuza 1/2.
So I couldn't find anything about this online, and I really didn't feel like booting up an emulator and going to every bar in the original Yakuza games just to see if I could find some vodka. So I'm going to just say that the original games had Stalagnia vodka, which seems to have been replaced by Sky vodka in later games. I will say I did find a game facts board where one guy says that he learned that Stalagnia means capital, and he learnt it from Yakuza, so I'm gonna use that as confirmation that it was in the old games.
First chairman of the Tojo clan.
Details on the founder and first chairman of the Tojo are very sparse. What we do know about Makoto Tojo is that he founded the clan, had a love of Japanese gardens, and possibly executed multiple men in the gardens behind Tojo HQ. A fun fact I found out was that any lore bits about him in the Yakuza 6 loading screens, as well as anyone else, are exclusive to the Western versions of the games, as the Japanese loading screens have no trivia at all.
Dead Souls is canon.
So this is just a gag entry, but like, nothing is saying that it isn't canon.
Kaoru's disappearance.
After changing writers between Yakuza 2 and 3, the series producers didn't really know where to go with Kaoru, so they just fucking shipped her off to America and forgot she existed. After Yakuza 3, she's only in very, very brief mentions, such as in Yakuza 5 when Kurosawa mentions a female cop falling for a Yakuza and how embarrassing that was for the organized crime division of Osaka. With that said, sometimes she's straight up forgotten about, like any time Kiryu's love life is brought up. He'll only mention Yumi and how she was his one true love.
Ichiban's mental health was broken after his girlfriend's death.
I don't think this is anywhere in Yakuza 7, so I'm assuming it's a part of RGG Online. Again, since it's Japan exclusive and doesn't exactly have much coverage in the West, I can't tell you much about this entry. I couldn't find anything about it.
Kiryu kills in Yakuza 1.
In Yakuza 1 and Kiwami, it's pretty fucking hard to argue that Kiryu didn't kill this random waiter.
お客様
So I touched on this a bit earlier in the Nobody is Dead entry, but these two in particular really take the cake for being stupid cameos in Yakuza 7. Lao Kalong and Kashiwagi
Kashiwagi-san. Kashiwagi-san.
both return in Yakuza 7 after being missing for around a decade. While it's not impossible to survive getting shot in the head, or just shot a lot, these two pretty definitively died in those games, especially considering Yakuza 6 has each of them as photo ghosts, which, as we mentioned earlier, means they're dead. I'm not mad that these guys were brought back, but let's be real, they're only brought back for fan service. So I'm pretty sure this entry is just referring to how Kiryu finds the Bacchus bar shot up during the events of Yakuza 1, and also meets Haruka here, as she's holding a gun.
Unknown families in the Tojo clan.
This is just a simple entry pointing out that there's a shit ton of unknown families in the Tojo that seemingly just disappear and reappear at random between games. The most we get for naming these random families comes in the Majima saga, where an earnings chart has a bunch of families listed. In the Yakuza games, you can enter Premium Adventure after completing the main game. This is a mode where you can go wherever you want and do whatever you want. It's used for completing side quests and minigames, and takes place after the events of the main story. Since some of these sub-stories involve a character named Rikia, who dies partway through the main game, this creates a time paradox if you were to wait this long to do it.
Takeshi Kitano hates video games.
Takeshi Kitano, who plays one of the lead characters in Yakuza 6, has publicly stated and made very clear that he fucking hates video games and thinks they're cringe. You might be thinking, what a fucking goof, why is he in Yakuza then? And I thought that too. Now the reason he agreed to do the games isn't because his views have changed or anything, but because he's drinking buddies with series creator Nagoshi.
Forgotten Yakuza side villains are dead.
This entry is just a theory or belief that any side villains who never reappeared in newer games are dead. I would take this with a grain of salt because side villains like Lao Kalong, who were dead, have come back perfectly fine.
Kamaki Taiwu and space travel.
So Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise isn't really a spin-off of Yakuza. There's a few nods to the series like the Kiryu skin, but in reality it's its own thing. This is put up for debate, however, when motherfucking Komaki shows up out of nowhere in a side quest, challenging Kenshiro to a duel. Since Fist of the North Star is clearly in a different world than our own, and typically takes place in the year 1990X, this makes Komaki a time and space traveler. Everything here also applies to Joemon, who makes a similar appearance after completing the game to 100%.
Canada's head.
Now, I don't know if there's more to this one, but this is just a reference to the fact that Mine killed Kanda, decapitated him, stuffed his head in a briefcase and brought it down as a show and tell to the main crew of Yakuza 3. I would guess this entry is just referring to the fact that we never actually see the head, but it's definitely there.
Mr. Shakedown Extermination.
So my best guess for this one would be that after Yakuza 0, Mr. Shakedowns no longer exist. At least not in any of the cities where the games take place. Again, that's all I could think of for this one. I couldn't really find anything.
Saejima and Haruka weeping scene.
So this entry is just referring to a really creepy scene where, after not seeing a woman in over 10 years due to being in prison, Saejima has a really fucking weird moment with Haruka after just meeting her.
じゃあ、私はおじさんに連絡してくるね。
ちょっと。
おじさん。
Walking Black and PC only in Yakuza 3.
Another one I couldn't find like a clip or a video of, but I'd assume this refers to Yakuza 3 having a Black Street NPC and being the only game with one, which explains itself.
Nagoshi hates Nintendo.
I'm guessing this entry is referring to an interview Nagoshi did where he said Nintendo consoles were aimed at kids and teens. Translators have said that what Nagoshi translated lacked nuance and missed the tone of what he said, but like either way, I wouldn't exactly call this hating Nintendo, I mean, he's not wrong. Like, they're made for kids. I don't think the Nintendo Switch is exactly aimed at like 40-year-old men.
All dishes in restaurants are actually items.
This one's another simple entry referring to the fact that through various item glitches, it was learned that every menu item in restaurants, at least the ones in pre-Dragon Engine games, is actually an item that can end up in your inventory through exploits.
Kiryu is a sexist. The florist disappears.
After Yakuza 5, the florist straight up disappears from the series, probably because he's too much of a writing crutch. Obviously his inclusion in 6 would have made the first quarter of the game about 5 minutes long, as Kiryu wouldn't have had to find Haruka and Akiyama on his own. As of 7 and Lost Judgment, he still hasn't returned, so I'd bet on him being gone for good.
Yakuza 7 is a satiric drama about modern Japan's problems and reality.
So this one would be pretty hard to go over without doing huge plot recaps on a lot of different aspects of Yakuza 7. And as this video is already going on long enough, and since 7 is recent enough that I want to avoid major spoilers here, I'm just going to sum it up as vaguely as possible. Now, Yakuza 7 has a lot to say politically about Japan, particularly on marginalized groups of society such as sex workers, the homeless, and immigrants. That's all I'm really going to say. If you want more on this, definitely check out Writing on Games' analysis of the game, and if you're looking for a real deep dive, check out Eurothug 4000's hour-long analysis on the game, its themes, and the story. I'll link each below in the description if you want to check those out.
Toshihiro Nagoshi's deceased.
So, like, Nagoshi isn't fucking dead or anything, so I'm just going to assume this one meant to say Nagoshi's departure. In 2021, Toshihiro Nagoshi, creator and head honcho behind the Yakuza series, actually left Sega to form a new studio with assistance from Chinese company NetEase. As of recording, what happens next is yet to be seen, but I can only hope it's good things, because he's made a lot of great games.
Haruka alternate costume in Dead Souls.
This is just an entry referring to Haruka's kinda sus alternate outfit in Dead Souls.
Final entry. Kiryu dies in the end of Yakuza 5.
Starting off with this, obviously future games have debunked this, but let's go over this as if Yakuza 5 was the last one. Now, near the ending of Yakuza 5, Kiryu is shot by Kurosawa in the gut. He wraps this up and is mostly stabilized until the very ending, when his wound begins bleeding again after a lengthy battle with Aizawa. After the credits roll, he begins to bleed out in an empty street, with the game cutting to black once he collapses. He wakes up after being found by Haruka, who stays with him until the game cuts to an ending screen. Now, her finding him is already a bit suspicious, as she went from doing a concert at the Tokyo Dome to happening to find Kiryu on some random backstreet somewhere in Tokyo. And Tokyo is a fucking huge place. Kiryu even comments on this, asking if he's dreaming, because her being there is so absurd. The theory here is that upon cutting to black for the first time when Kiryu collapsed, that was it for him. then he died, then and there. This theory isn't even that far-fetched, as unless Kiryu called Haruka or something, there's genuinely pretty much zero chance that she would have found him. None of this is even taking into consideration that Haruka would have likely been swarmed by media and fans after what she said in the ending, likely didn't have any form of transportation as she didn't have a car or anything, and would have also had to have kept Kiryu alive and stable for long enough to get medical attention to him. With that being said, this theory also doesn't take into account that stamina drinks can canonically heal people, as seen in Zero. Along with this, it doesn't take into account Kiryu being generally superhuman. I mean, come on, is one bullet really gonna stop this guy? Hey, you've made it this far. That's wicked cool. I just want to thank you for sitting through this monolith of an iceberg and for being cool. I just want to thank all the sources here, with major shoutouts to the Yakuza Wiki, which helped a shit ton in the research of this iceberg. This video has already gone on far longer than it should have, and that was with me keeping most of the entries pretty brief, so I'm going to end it here without dragging this out. If you want to see more shit like this, be sure to stick around, and thanks for watching.